If you have over $100,000 invested into DeFi right now, or you plan on deploying over $100,000 in DeFi, then I want you to listen up carefully. There's a concept in traditional finance called risk-adjusted returns. And ultimately, risk-adjusted returns are returns adjusting for the risk. So what that might look like in DeFi is you might have, let's just say, a meme coin liquidity pool. And this thing right here is doing a 500% APR. It's doing great. But you're taking inherently more risk in a 500% APR meme coin liquidity pool than you would be in, let's just say, a blue chip liquidity pool that might be doing an 80% APR. So risk-adjusted returns essentially adjust the return, the 500% APR, to see if it's really worth the risk. How much risk do you put in and how much return do you get out? So before we talk about measurement of these things and everything like that, let's just say this requires 10 units of risk. Simple as that. And we get out 500% APR. Well, then over here, this blue chip liquidity pool might require, let's just say, 1 unit of risk, and we get out 80% APR. Well, over here in the meme coin liquidity pool, we're getting about a 50% APR per unit of risk. Whereas over here in the blue chip liquidity pool, we're getting an 80% APR per unit of risk. So when we look at the risk adjusted returns of both of these liquidity pools objectively, you could see that the blue chip liquidity pool wins because it is doing a higher APR per unit of risk that you're inputting. Now there's many ways to calculate risk adjusted returns, and we're not going to be diving into that in today's video, but if you want me to make some content around that, make sure to drop a like and subscribe, notifications turned on, and let me know what problems you guys are facing down below in the comment section. But some of the popular methods of calculating risk adjusted return is through the Sharpe ratio, the Trainer ratio, the Jensen's alpha, or of course the information ratio. And this is typically how they're calculated in TradFi. In DeFi, we don't really have a metric for calculating risk adjusted returns, but they are still there and it still follows the same exact concept, because investing in a meme coin liquidity pool is inherently more risky than investing into a blue chip liquidity pool. So look, when you have $100,000 invested into DeFi, whether it's across 2-3 liquidity pools, whether it's across 5-10 liquidity pools, right? A simple 5% mistake on your portfolio is going to cost you $5,000, right? Just like that, $5,000 is wiped away because of a small 5% mistake. Now, talk about how easy it is for 5% mistakes to be made. You could see that Bitcoin alone is down 4% in the past 7 days. XRP is down 6% in the past 7 days. Solana is down 11% in the past 7 days. So it is super, super easy to make these mistakes. The reason why is because the crypto market is very volatile. And I don't mean a mistake by investing into Solana and then it goes down a little bit. It's not a mistake. That's how markets work. We accumulate assets while the market is going down, and then we sell them on the way up through liquidity pool earnings. But here's the thing. If you have just a little bit too much divergence loss, it's super easy to make that 11% decline into a 16-17% decline or 20% decline where you're underperforming the market. Now I'm going to hide my beautiful face so I can show you this in great detail. When we look at the category allocations, I want to talk about what you would do if you have $100,000, because a lot of people think, oh, I got $100,000 to invest into DeFi. Just chuck it all in liquidity pools, call it a day. It's going to be a great journey. And then boom, their portfolio just blows, right? And they wonder what happened? Why did this go wrong, right? It's because, of course, they're not operating efficiently and they do not have a strategy in place. So what we do with most of the clients that we work with at our DeFi Legacy program is we allocate 50% to our liquidity pools. Then we go and we allocate 30% to lending. And then we allocate another 20% to hodls. In some cases, when we start to scale, that's where we would introduce advanced strategies. But why jump into the deep end of the pool without knowing how to swim? It's just not a good idea. You're going to drown. The proper way to do things is you start up here on the concrete, you take a step down into the water, you feel it, you say this water's nice, and then you start to take another step down and another step down instead of just jumping straight into the deep end and then drowning, because that's what happens in so many people's portfolios. They jump straight into the deep end of the pool, try to dive into all these advanced strategies. They go and they follow so many people on Twitter, but they overlook the fact that they are overcomplicating things. In my portfolio today, I have 4 positions, and they are absolutely killer positions. So I have 4 very, very, very good positions as opposed to 40 mediocre positions, or as even opposed to 15 mediocre positions. That means that the current positions that I have are manageable, they're very good, and I'm very, very confident on them, and they perform very, very well because I don't let the emotions get the best of me in my liquidity pool investing, because I have very, very high conviction in the investments, because I didn't try to diversify a lot. I found very good assets and I dove into those for liquidity pools. And unfortunately, there's not a lot out there. there. So let's move forward. Now that we've determined, hey, 50 grand of this $100,000 is going to liquidity pools, 30 grand is going to lending, and 20 grand is going to huddles. What happens next? So what happens next is actually pretty funny. We make it even more simple. We're not allocating to stable liquidity pools. Why? Because they're doing about a 20% return. At our current level, if we allocate even say 5 grand to those, 20% on 5 grand is $1,000 a year. We have bigger problems to worry about. That's 1% of our overall portfolio value. That is not going to make a lasting effect on our portfolio. So we allocate $0 to it. When we start to get into the millions, that's where we allocate to stable. Unless, of course, we have a market neutral focused portfolio, but that's not what we're talking about today. Next off, we have crypto to stable. How much is going here? Well, it depends on what's going on in the market. If the market is chopping sideways or maybe going up a little, going down a little, right? We'll do about 20 to 30% or so. Whereas if the market's going constantly up, well, we're not going to do any allocation here whatsoever. So in this case right now, let's just say 20%. And then as far as our crypto to crypto liquidity pools, we will do 80%. We do a large allocation here because there is not much divergence loss compared to over here. Again, it comes down to risk-adjusted returns. Let's take this same exact example that we talked about earlier, the meme coin liquidity pool versus the blue chip liquidity pool. And let's compare a C2C liquidity pool, which is crypto to crypto, and a C2S liquidity pool, which is crypto to stable. The crypto to stable is probably doing about a 100% APR, and the crypto to crypto is probably doing about a 65% APR. Now, here's the thing. Both of these probably have 1 unit of risk associated with it. At least if we look at very, very similar liquidity pools as far as like risk units and categories go, basically. So the C2C could be something like Ethereum to Bitcoin, whereas the C2S could be Ethereum to USDC or Bitcoin to USDC. Same level of risk, except one of them is doing a 65% APR. The other one's doing a 100% APR. Now, here's the thing in this instance, right? A lot of you will say, well, just dive into the C2S. It is the same unit of risk, but it's doing a higher APR at 100%. But in that case scenario, what we're actually doing is we're capping our upside. So returns aren't just the APR, they are the upside that we get from liquidity pools. And this one might have 3 units of upside, whereas the one over here on the C2S might only have 1 unit of upside, because as the market rises, your crypto is getting sold into a stablecoin because people are buying your crypto and they're giving you a stablecoin. That's why the market is rising. So in this instance, that's why we primarily allocate to crypto, at least while the market is going up. When the market's going down, we want to acquire assets. We want to accumulate as much as possible. So yes, it makes sense to heavily allocate to crypto to stable liquidity pools. Or when the market's going sideways and there's not much upside, not much downside, yes, it makes sense to put our capital here because of course we're not going up much or down much, so we're not going to really have any divergence loss, but we are going to get a higher APR. So right now, let's just assume an 80-20 ratio. Over here in the lending, we might have say 10% of the overall lending allocation in stable, and those are really just stables ready to be deployed into the market whenever we see dips in the market. The other 90% goes to crypto. Now here's the thing, these cryptos over on the lending, these are blue chip cryptos. So these are Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Link, Aave, any token that you can lend out that's somewhat blue chip in the top 50 by market cap, that's going to be lent out basically, right? We want to minimize the amount that's not lent out. The reason why is because we want to get used to lending and borrowing. So later on, we can start to ramp up strategies with leverage lending. We could start to introduce just leveraging our lending for liquidity pools, right? There's so many opportunities out there, but we don't do that yet. We don't jump into the deep into the pool. We dive into HODLs next, which is our crypto and stable. We're going to allocate $0 to the stable, and we're going to allocate 100% over here to the crypto. And these cryptos this time are altcoins that have a lot of growth potential, altcoins that have utility, a reason to buy them, altcoins that operate as an actual business as opposed to some random model where they're just expecting to grow and there's really no growth in store in the future. There's no reason for it to go up other than other people buying it or their marketing team doing their job. And this right here is what your portfolio might look like. 50% in liquidity pools, in which 80% of that is split into crypto to crypto, 20% in crypto to stable, 30% in lending, in which 90% of that is in blue chip cryptos being lent out. The other $3,000 is waiting to be deployed upon dips, just stablecoins sitting there. And then 20% in HODLs, in which all of that is just in altcoins that have a lot of growth potential and have high utility. And then from there, we can start to create strategies. But I'm not going to be diving into that in today's video. If you guys do want me to make a dedicated video on different liquidity pools that you can dive in if you do have above $100,000, I want to hear from you guys. Let me know that you want that video down below in the comment section. As always, you know what to do. Drop a like, subscribe, notifications turned on. And if you do want to learn more about my strategy and how I can help my legacy clients achieve a financial legacy through decentralized finance. There's a video that's going to be on screen right now that you can click. It's going to walk you through my process, and then from there, you can speak with my team. I'll see you guys in the next video. Once again, don't forget to check that one out. Peace out.